We're in London at a rally for media reform. It's right in the middle of the Leveson Inquiry, where the ethics of press and politicians are right in the public eye. I'm talking here to Dan Hind, who's the author of Return of the Public. He knows an awful lot about media and media reform, and he's going to talk to us here. So, Dan, where have we got to with the Leveson?
Well, it's certainly the case that I think in the last couple of months we've started to see some very interesting details being elaborated and clarified. I wouldn't say that we've seen a huge amount that's brand new. What we've seen, I think, is confirmation of what was suspected. If you look back a couple of years, to say what is now being said openly would have attracted accusations of being extreme or of being hysterical. I think now it's clear that, if anything, critics of the media perhaps underplayed just how much had gone wrong. So, for example, we've heard the Deputy Commissioner of the Met say that there was a network of corrupt public officials that was being run by News International. That's a major allegation. We've also seen, interestingly, I think, serving journalists talking about newsroom culture, which is with an openness we haven't really seen since the 1970s. So we're already, I think, seeing some very interesting confirmations of how the media operate. What I think is really up to us and up to the campaign for media reform is to build on what's being discussed at Leveson. I think it would be a mistake to think that Leveson is the alpha and omega of what's going on.
And we have heard these various incidents being put on the public record. We can talk about them now without fear of things like defamation suits and the rest. But, I mean, how do we prevent this being just a sort of flash-in-the-pan story of the day and fading away and we get on to something else?
Well, I think that's the point. I think that really the campaigns like the Committee for Media Reform, the Campaign for Media Reform and others need to really address. There is a danger, as you say, that we'll wait for some comments from Leveson about what should and shouldn't happen, and we'll see some changes in regulation. Clearly, changes in regulation are necessarily, I think they're going to happen. The danger is that will be the sum of what happens. And I think if that's the case, then we won't really have got to the heart of what's happened.
And, I mean, we're beginning to look at fundamental questions of relationships between the highest of politicians and media barons. Those play out both for the Labour Party, for the Conservative Party. I mean, it goes to the heart of this relationship between politicians and the press. How do you deal with that without fundamental reform of both, even?
Well, I think that fundamental reform of the media would imply fundamental reform of the political process, and this is why we've had a kind of closed circle between the media and the political classes. They don't want to talk about media, or haven't wanted to talk about media reform in any fundamental sense, for precisely that reason. Because to talk about a genuinely confrontational media system, a system that was able to challenge other forms of power, genuinely push into areas where they were, as it were, not wanted, that would imply a radical change in the way that politics is conducted. It would imply radical change in the way that the economy is run as well. So we've had, an increasingly sort of fetid and poisonous relationship that's built up between a kind of complex of very powerful institutions. You think of the major sectors in the private economy, you think of the media system, you think of the political establishment. And they've been running things in a way that really kind of suits their interests quite well. The problem is that it is kind of been a metastasizing criminal endeavour. It's become increasingly difficult to run the show without recourse to systemic criminality. Unless we reform the media, breaking up that nexus, I think, is going to be very, very difficult. And I think what we're seeing at the moment is the usual tussle between those who want to make sure things change so that everything can remain the same, and those who want to actually bring kind of daylight in on the magic and make something new out of what is definitely a crisis in the media, which is obviously of a piece with a crisis in the political and the economic systems as well.
So, as you can see, there's plenty still to do. Dan Hind, who follows these things very closely, is the author of Return of the Public. This is Patrick Chalmers for Vision on TV.